The Crypto Markets Update is brought to you by KuCoin, the best place to find the next crypto gem.
And joining us now to discuss the crypto markets ahead of both the merge and August CPI data is Lex Sokolin. He's head economist at Ethereum Development Hub, ConsenSys. Good morning, Lex.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
Great being with you as well. And so we have the merge, and I think we, at the very beginning of this broadcast, I mentioned that we're seeing volatility in the price of Ethereum right now, in Ether right now. Let's say compared to Bitcoin, in part of it is the moving. It's moving with the price of Bitcoin, but it's also got this own unique feature. The merge coming up this week, in the next few days, rather. We can't say definitively, of course. You can't actually say the exact moment it'll happen. Nonetheless, we expect it happening. So a couple of things. Is it really affecting the price of ETH right now compared to other cryptocurrencies? And why don't we start with that? What do you think? Do you think that it has its own unique aspect to it that's moving the price differently from the rest of the market?
Yeah, I think dangerous questions, but of course, prices reflect the information that's flowing out into the market, and Ethereum has different dynamics from other cryptocurrencies. It has the supply side dynamics around the merge, so. Proof of stake Ethereum looks different in terms of its economics than proof of work Ethereum, and there's going to be advantages in terms of the supply side. And then on the demand side, like the things that make Ethereum work and that are interesting and the developments in Web3, those are also something that's, I think, bespoke to that asset. That said, everything is related to the macro environment. So, we're all subject still to the Fed, the inflation numbers, and all of that.
I want to touch on that CPI data in a little bit, but of course, does the merge affect what you do at ConsenSys? What ConsenSys will do going forward? Does anything change for ConsenSys?
So for ConsenSys, we focus on two sides of let's say the platform or the network. And the first side is users with MetaMask and making sure that people can actually touch and use Web3 products and applications. And then on the other side with products like Infura, it's making sure that developers, and I think something like 500,000 developers, can build on Web3 and on Ethereum. And so from our perspective, these are our consistent goals. I think it's really important that after proof of stake, people can continue to use Ethereum and understand how gas works, understand what it means to burn the fee and the types of savings that creates for people, understand how the network is validated, and the fact that people are going to have the opportunity to stake. Many, many more people are going to have the opportunity to stake. And I think that's on the user side. Now, on the developer side, we turn on access, we enable access to a whole bunch of EVM compatible chains, and of course, making sure that we support Ethereum once it's on the proof of stake side is really important. And then we do a ton of work. I mean, just a ton of work working on the protocol. So we have a large team that contributes code to the network. And of course, we've been doing that now for years and years.
So Lex, all of this sounds incredibly bullish for Ethereum. And on top of that, Bank of America is saying that the Ethereum blockchain's upgrade will lead to greater institutional adoption of ETH. And yet today we're seeing ETH in reverse compared to the rest of the crypto markets. Why is that?
Wiggly lines are always very emotional, and I think there are catalysts that move the price up, and of course people try to anticipate those catalysts and often trade against them in the short term and so on. There's some dynamics around trying to borrow ETH ahead of the merge and the potential other forks, but I think if you are looking at Web3, you just have to take the long view, and from my perspective, the ESG narrative is extremely positive. So moving into a world where Web3 takes up 99.9% less energy is going to be a huge improvement, at least in the sense of a barrier goes away for artists, for game developers, for anybody who wants to build large infrastructure in the space. So I think despite the short-term changes in the price, the long-term outlook, I think from a secular perspective, is very positive.
So, Lex, I mentioned CPI earlier, and as Christine knows, I'm loath to ascribe any of the general price movement in crypto to worries about inflation, because as we've seen, since inflation has risen, the price of, let's say, Bitcoin has gone from 68,000 to 20-something thousand. So I think that whole theory kind of isn't really real. Nonetheless, there's still this group of people who think that, yeah, it affects the price of Bitcoin. So we have CPI data coming out. What happens if what happens if the CPI data is worse than expected? That is, if we show higher than expected inflation. And what happens if it's lower than expected? What do you think is going to happen? What's the reaction going to be in the crypto markets?
Yeah, I think this is the really hard game of thinking about expectations of what everyone else is expecting, and then imagining what happens if reality is different from expectations, and then trying to position to that. I think it's really difficult. When I think about inflation, the take isn't necessarily that Bitcoin or ETH are inflation hedges, and if you look at the quantitative data, they have not been, at least over the last year. But if you think about who uses crypto, end of the day, it's people, and people have consumer expenditure. They have a budget for consumption and for risk-on assets and experimenting with new technologies and doing new interesting things. And so when you start pushing people's ability to spend down and down and down, that's when you start, I think, seeing contractions in the risk-on assets, because people use them as a piggy bank. They cash them out. And so I think the story about the macroeconomic environment is, if it allows consumers to have a larger budget, and certainly the COVID environment was that. If people have a larger budget, they're more likely to take risks. They're more likely to use Web3 and try new protocols. And then if they're compressed and they're much more worried about paying down, their mortgages or their rents, they're going to have less discretionary budget, and so that's going to be damaging for crypto prices in the short term.
Lex, do you think that there will ever be a flippening between Ethereum and Bitcoin? That is, an event where Ethereum will become more valuable than Bitcoin? Or is it that because Ethereum's use case is to be used versus Bitcoin, which the narrative is to be a store of value and to be a hedge against inflation? Do you think because of that Ethereum will always stay relatively low in price compared to Bitcoin?
I think reasonable people can take very different positions on this issue, and those positions can all be justified. The way that I would see it is that in the Ethereum network going forward, the ability of a regular user, and certainly of any institutional user, to stake in the network and get something like anywhere between a 3% to a 10% interest rate, first off, that will set a kind of a benchmark rate for the DeFi sector and for the crypto sector as a whole. And so we think that a fairly large portion of people are going to be staking their ETH in the protocol to secure the protocol, which in a sense is going to inevitably turn at least some of the ETH into a store of value inside of the network. And you can look also at DeFi and see Ethereum used as collateral as well. And the recent news around MakerDAO and other protocols that are looking for decentralized collateral, those are certainly supportive of ETH as a store of value, ultrasound money type asset. I think on top of that, ETH is also used to power the protocol, and often as a unit of account for all sorts of goods and NFTs inside of Web3. And so I think it has both of those functions, the sound money function as well as the store of value function. And I think the thing I would be excited in regards to Bitcoin would be to see more Bitcoin incorporated into Web3, likely through bridging or wrapping or other ways, because I think it is a fantastic decentralized money. And if it could be used as collateral inside of Web3, that would be even more powerful, if that continued to increase.
Do you think ETH will flip Bitcoin?
Do I think ETH will flip Bitcoin? It's a question like, will the economy be bigger than all the money in the world? If I were to put my neck on the line, I think the growth rate of ETH is going to be higher in the short term because there's a lot of stuff going on. But the broader question is a mystery for the gods.